A ghost from the past, the Virginia sun hung low over Riverside Valley, painting the Blue Ridge Mountains in shades of amber and rose. Jackson Wright gripped the steering wheel of his silver Porsche, watching the familiar road unfold before him like a chapter he thought he had closed forever. 10 years had passed since he left this place with nothing but a borrowed suitcase and burning ambition. Now at 35, he owned half of downtown Richmond and had his name on buildings across 3 states. But none of that mattered as he turned onto Willow Creek Road. The gravel crunched beneath expensive tires as he pulled up to the old Wright family estate. What he expected to find was an abandoned house with broken windows and overgrown weeds. What he saw instead made his heart stop cold. Smoke curled from the chimney. Fresh paint gleamed on the shutters. In the garden, rows of vegetables grew in neat lines, and someone had rebuilt the fence his grandfather made decades ago. Jackson stepped out of the car, his designer shoes immediately dusted with red Virginia clay. That was when he heard the laughter. High and bright, the sound of children playing without a care in the world. He walked toward the garden, his chest tightening with each step. That was when he saw her. The woman who stayed behind Amelia Parker knelt in the dirt, her auburn hair tied back with a faded bandana, her hands deep in the soil as she planted tomatoes. She wore old jeans and a white tank top, both streaked with earth and sweat. Even from a distance, Jackson recognized the graceful curve of her neck, the way she hummed softly while she worked. His wife. His ex-wife. The woman he left behind without a proper goodbye. For a moment, Jackson forgot how to breathe. Time collapsed. He was 25 again, watching her dance in the kitchen, promising her the world, believing he could give it to her if he just worked hard enough. Then she turned. Their eyes met across the garden, and the world went silent. Amelia stood slowly, brushing dirt from her hands. Her hazel eyes held no surprise, only a calm recognition that cut deeper than anger ever could. "Jackson Wright," she said, her voice steady but cold. "Funny, I stopped expecting you about 9 years ago." He opened his mouth, but no words came. What could he say? That he was sorry? That he meant to come back? That every success felt hollow because she was not there to share it? "I did not think anyone still lived here," he finally managed. Amelia tilted her head, a bitter smile touching her lips. "Who did you think kept the lights on? The grass cut? The taxes paid?" Before Jackson could respond, 3 small figures came running from behind the apple trees. They moved like a wave, all giggles and flying hair, racing toward Amelia with the boundless energy only children possess. 2 girls and a boy, maybe 4 years old, with golden brown hair and sun-kissed skin and eyes. Brilliant emerald green eyes that mirrored his own with unsettling precision. Jackson felt the ground tilt beneath him. "The children with his eyes, Mommy. Look what we found." The taller girl held up a smooth river stone, beaming with pride. Amelia bent down, her expression softening in a way that made Jackson's heart ache. "That's beautiful, Ruby. Did you find it by the creek?" "Mason helped me," Ruby said, nudging her brother. The boy grinned shyly, clutching a stick like a sword. The smallest girl, quiet but observant, watched Jackson with curious eyes. "Harper, stop staring at the stranger," Amelia said gently. But Harper did not look away. "Mommy, why does he have eyes like us?" The question hung in the air like a thunderclap. Jackson took a shaky step forward, his voice breaking. "Amelia, tell me they are not mine." She stood slowly, positioning herself between him and the children. Her gaze was unflinching, tired but strong. "You know the answer, Jackson? You knew it the second you saw them." He staggered back, his mind racing. 4 years old. That meant she was pregnant when he left. Pregnant with triplets, alone in this house, while he chased deals and dollar signs in the city. "I did not know," he whispered, his voice raw. "I swear I did not know." Amelia's laugh was short and humorless. "Of course you did not. You changed your number? You never wrote. You sent divorce papers through a lawyer like I was a business transaction." Jackson felt the words like physical blows. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought if I made something of myself first, I could come back and give you everything you deserved. I did not need everything, Jackson. Her voice cracked, just slightly. I just needed you. The children watched silently, sensing the weight of the conversation, even if they could not understand it. Ruby tugged on Amelia's shirt. Mommy, who is he? Amelia closed her eyes briefly, then looked down at her daughter with a sad smile. Just someone who lost his way, sweetheart. When the past comes, Knock and Jackson stood frozen, as Amelia herded the children back toward the house, their small voices fading into the distance. He wanted to call out, to explain, to beg forgiveness, but shame held his tongue. He looked around the property with new eyes. Everything here spoke of survival and determination. The rebuilt porch, the fresh coat of paint, the thriving garden. Amelia had taken his family's crumbling legacy and breathed life into it, all while raising 3 children alone. While he built towers of glass and steel, she built a home. Jackson walked slowly to his car, but his hand froze on the door handle. He could not leave. Not this time. He turned back toward the house, watching smoke curl from the chimney against the darkening sky. Somewhere inside, his children were laughing, living. Growing up without knowing his name, he had spent 10 years running from the fear of not being enough. Now, standing in the shadow of everything he had lost, Jackson realized the terrible truth. He had become exactly what he feared. A man with everything except the only things that mattered. As twilight settled over Riverside Valley, Jackson Wright made a decision. He would not run this time. He would stay. He would face the mess he created. And somehow, he would find a way to earn back what he so carelessly threw away. The lights in the farmhouse glowed warm and golden, a beacon in the gathering darkness. Jackson took a deep breath, Virginia air filling his lungs with memories of simpler times. Tomorrow, he would knock on that door. Tomorrow, he would begin the hardest work of his life, not building an empire, building a family. The morning after dawn broke over Riverside Valley with the soft colors of forgiveness, pale pink and gold stretching across the horizon. Jackson had not slept, spent the night in his car parked at the edge of the property, watching the farmhouse. Through the windshield, rehearsing 1,000 different apologies that all felt inadequate. When the sun finally rose, he saw Amelia emerge from the house, a coffee mug in her hands. She stood on the porch for a long moment, her gaze fixed on his car. She knew he was there. She had probably known all night. Jackson stepped out, his expensive suit wrinkled, his face unshaven. He looked nothing like the polished businessman who had arrived yesterday, and everything like the lost man he truly was. "You're still here," Amelia said quietly as he approached. "I could not leave," he replied, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "Not this time." She studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "The kids will be up soon. If you are going to be here, you might as well make yourself useful. The chicken coop needs fixing." It was not forgiveness, but it was not rejection either. Jackson nodded, relief flooding through him. Learning to build again, the chicken coop stood at the far end of the property, leaning dangerously to one side. Jackson stared at it, realizing with embarrassment that he had no idea where to begin. He could negotiate million-dollar contracts in his sleep, but basic carpentry was a foreign language. Amelia appeared beside him with a toolbox. "You really have forgotten everything about this place, have you not?" "I never knew much to begin with," he admitted. "My father tried to teach me, but I was always too busy dreaming about leaving." She handed him a hammer. "And I guess it is time you learned about staying." They worked in silence at first, the only sounds the clink of tools and the distant calls of birds. Amelia showed him how to reinforce the posts, how to measure twice and cut once, how to work with his hands instead of just his head. "Why did you keep this place?" Jackson asked as they nailed a new board into place. "You could have sold it. Used the money to make life easier." Amelia paused, her expression distant. "Because the kids needed roots, something stable. And maybe because I hoped that one day you would remember you had a home." The confession hung between them, vulnerable and honest. "I found something," Jackson said suddenly, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a crumpled envelope, yellowed with age. "It was in my old room at my apartment in Richmond. I guess I packed it years ago and forgot." Amelia took it, her hands trembling slightly as she recognized his handwriting. "You wrote me a letter? I never sent it. I was too afraid." She opened it carefully, and Jackson watched her face as she read his words from a decade ago. Words about fear and inadequacy, about loving her too much to trap her in his uncertain future, about planning to come back when he was worthy. When she finished, tears streaked her cheeks. "You were always worthy, Jackson. You just never believed it." The storm arrives that afternoon. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon with alarming speed. The air grew heavy and electric, the way it does before a violent storm. Amelia checked the sky with worried eyes. "We need to secure everything," she said urgently. Ruby, Mason, Harper, inside now. The children came running from the yard, their faces flushed from play. Jackson helped Amelia board up windows and tie down anything that could blow away. The wind picked up, whipping through the trees with increasing fury. Then the rain came. Not a gentle shower, but a wall of water that turned the world gray and roaring. Thunder cracked overhead like artillery fire. "The barn," Amelia shouted over the noise. "The horses are in there and the door is loose." Without thinking, Jackson ran toward the barn, rain instantly soaking him to the bone. He could barely see. 3 feet ahead, but he pushed forward, driven by something beyond logic. He reached the barn just as the main door tore loose from its hinges, swinging wildly in the wind. Inside, 2 horses whinnied in panic, their eyes rolling white with fear. Jackson grabbed the door, fighting to pull it closed against the gale. His dress shoes slipped in the mud. His hands, soft from years of desk work, began to bleed from splinters. Then Amelia was beside him. Her shoulder pressed against the door, her strength joining his. "On 3, she yelled. 1, 2, 3, together." They hauled the door shut and dropped the heavy beam across it. The horses calmed immediately, sensing safety. They stood there, drenched and breathing hard, looking at each other in the dim light of the barn. Rain hammered on the tin roof like 1,000 drums. "Confessions in the storm. Why did you come back?" Amelia asked, her voice cutting through the noise. "The truth this time." Jackson leaned against the wall, exhausted. "My father died 3 months ago, left me this property in his will. I came to sign papers, to sell it, to close this chapter of my life forever. And now I realize this chapter never closed. It has been waiting for me all along." Amelia wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. "You hurt me, Jackson. You left me pregnant and alone. Do you know what that was like? It's finding out I was carrying 3 babies. It's going to appointments by myself, giving birth with only nurses holding my hand." Her voice cracked, years of pain spilling out. "I called you. I wrote you. I tried everything. But you had already erased me from your life, like I never existed." Jackson felt his throat tighten. "I changed my number because every time you called, I wanted to come home. I was terrified. Terrified of being my father, of being a failure, of not being able to provide. So you chose to be absent instead," she said quietly. "You chose to be nothing." The words struck him like lightning. She was right. In trying to avoid one fear, he had become something worse. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I am so sorry, Amelia. I cannot change what I did, but I am here now. I want to be the man I should have been." Amelia looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "It is not me you need to apologize to, Jackson. It is them. 3 children who grew up wondering why they did not have a father." Through a gap in the barn wall, they could see the farmhouse, its windows glowing warm against the storm. 3 small silhouettes pressed against the glass, watching, waiting. The children's questions. When the storm finally passed, they returned to the house, muddy and exhausted. The children swarmed Amelia immediately, their relief palpable. "Mommy, we were scared," Harper said, clinging to her mother's leg. "I am here, baby. We are all safe." Ruby looked at Jackson with curious eyes. "You helped Mommy?" "I tried," he said softly, kneeling down to her level. Mason stepped forward, bolder than his sisters. "Are you going to stay?" The question froze everyone. Amelia tensed, waiting for his answer. Jackson looked at each child, really seeing them for the first time. Ruby, with her thoughtful eyes. Mason with his brave little chin. Harper, with her gentle spirit. Each one a piece of him and Amelia, a living testament to a love he had abandoned. "Would you want me to stay?" he asked carefully. The children looked at each other, then at their mother. Amelia said nothing, leaving the choice to them. Finally, Ruby nodded. "You have sad eyes, like Mommy used to have. Maybe if you stay, you will both be happy again." Jackson felt something break open in his chest. He looked at Amelia, and for the first time since he arrived, he saw her walls begin to crack. A new threat emerges that evening. After the children were asleep, Amelia and Jackson sat on the porch. The storm had washed the world clean, leaving behind the sweet smell of wet earth. "I want to transfer the property deed to you," Jackson said suddenly. "It should have been yours all along." Amelia shook her head. "I do not want your charity." "It is not charity. It is what is right." Before she could respond, headlights appeared at the end of the driveway. A sleek black SUV pulled up, and a man in an expensive suit stepped out. "Jackson, right?" the man called. "My name is Preston Cole. I represent Titanium Corporation. We have been trying to reach you about this property." Jackson stood, instantly wary. "I am not interested in selling." Preston smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "I think you will be when you hear our offer. $5 million? Cash? Closing in 30 days. Amelia gasped. That was more money than she could imagine, but Jackson's expression hardened. "The property is not for sale." "I think you misunderstand," Preston continued smoothly. "We have done our research. This land was part of Wright Industries before your father passed, which means it technically falls under commercial zoning. And Titanium has already filed preliminary development plans with the county." "That is illegal," Amelia said, her voice shaking. Preston shrugged. "It is complicated. But we have excellent lawyers. You could fight us in court, of course. That would take years and cost more than this farm is worth, or you could take our generous offer and walk away." He placed a business card on the porch railing. "You have 1 week to decide. After that, we will proceed with or without your cooperation." The SUV drove away, leaving silence in its wake. Jackson picked up the card, his jaw clenched. "They cannot do this, cannot they?" Amelia said quietly. "You have money and lawyers. But I am just a single mother squatting on property I do not legally own. If they want this land, what can we do to stop them?" Jackson turned to her, and in his eyes she saw something new. Not the scared boy who ran away, but a man who had finally found something worth fighting for. "We fight," he said firmly. "Together, they want a war? They just picked one with the wrong family." Amelia looked at him, then at the house where their children slept, and slowly she nodded. For the first time in 10 years, they were on the same side. The father revealed morning light filtered through the kitchen windows as Amelia made breakfast. Jackson sat at the table with the 3 children, watching them eat pancakes with an intensity that made Amelia nervous. I need to tell them," he had said earlier. "They deserve to know." Now, as Ruby and Mason argued over the last strawberry and Harper drew pictures and spilled syrup, the moment had arrived. "Kids," Jackson said gently, his voice thick with emotion, "I need to talk to you about something important." 3 pairs of green eyes turned toward him, curious and trusting in a way that made his heart ache. "You know how you sometimes ask your mom about your dad?" Ruby nodded slowly. Mason set down his fork. Harper climbed down from her chair and moved closer, her small hand reaching for his. Jackson took a shaky breath. "I am your dad. I am your father. And I am so sorry I was not here before." The silence stretched. Then Ruby spoke, her voice small. "Did you not want us?" The question shattered him. "No, baby. I wanted you more than anything. I was just scared and stupid. I thought I had to be perfect before I could be your dad, but I was wrong." Mason's eyes filled with tears. "Are you going to leave again?" Jackson dropped to his knees, pulling all 3 children into his arms. "Never. I promise you, I will never leave you again. I am going to be here for breakfast and dinner, in bedtime stories and scraped knees, in every single moment I missed." Harper pulled back, studying his face seriously. "Do you love Mommy?" Jackson looked over their heads at Amelia, who stood frozen by the stove, tears streaming down her face. "Yes," he said honestly. "I always have." Ruby wiped her eyes, then made a decision. "Okay, you can be our dad, but you have to prove it." "How?" Jackson asked. Mason grinned through his tears. "Build us a tree house. A real one." Building together, the old oak tree in the backyard had stood for over 100 years, its branches spreading wide and strong. Jackson stood beneath it, a tape measure in hand, while the children pointed out exactly where the treehouse should go. "Higher," Ruby insisted. "Yes, with a slide," Mason added. "And a secret door," Harper said quietly. Amelia watched from the porch, a smile tugging at her lips despite the worry that gnawed at her. The threat from Titanium Corporation hung over them like a dark cloud, but for this moment, she let herself enjoy the sight of Jackson trying to be a father. He was terrible at it in the most endearing way. He measured 3 times and still cut the board wrong. He hammered his thumb twice. He got tangled in rope and nearly fell off the ladder, but he kept trying. "Dad, you were doing it backwards," Ruby observed with the brutal honesty of childhood. "Am I?" Jackson laughed, and the sound was so genuine that Amelia's breath caught. "Then I guess you'd better help me." For hours they worked, Jackson and the 3 children, building something together. Amelia eventually joined them, showing Jackson the right way to secure the platform, and their hands touched as they held a beam in place. For just a moment, the years melted away, and they were young again, full of hope and possibility. "What should we call it?" Harper asked when the basic structure was complete. "The Wright family treehouse," Jackson said softly. "If that is okay with everyone," the children cheered. Amelia said nothing, but she did not object. The legal battle begins 3 days later. They sat in a cramped office across from Rebecca Torres, the best property lawyer in the county. She was a sharp woman in her 50s, with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Let me be honest," Rebecca said, spreading documents across her desk. "Titanium Corporation is a monster. They have crushed dozens of small property owners. They use legal loopholes, intimidation, and deep pockets to get what they want." "Can we fight them?" Jackson asked. "Maybe. The key is proving that this land was always intended as a personal residence, not a commercial asset." "Do you have anything that documents that?" "Letters, tax records, statements of intent." Amelia reached into her bag and pulled out a thick folder. "I have 10 years of property tax receipts, all paid from my personal account. Utility bills in my name. Records of agricultural activity. I even have receipts for the improvements I made." Rebecca's eyebrows rose, impressed. "This is excellent. What about you, Jackson? Any documentation of your original intent when you purchased the property?" Jackson hesitated, then pulled out the letter he had written to Amelia years ago. "I wrote this before I left. It states my intention to leave the property to her. I just never sent it." Rebecca read it carefully, her expression neutral. "This might work. If we can authenticate the date and handwriting, it shows that even before your father's death, you viewed this as family property, not business assets. So we have a chance?" Amelia asked hopefully. "A small one. But Titanium will argue that you abandoned the property for 10 years, that Amelia has no legal claim, and that the children were born after your separation. They will paint her as a squatter and you as a negligent owner." Jackson's hands clenched into fists. "That is not true." "Truth does not always matter in court," Rebecca said bluntly. "What matters is what we can prove. Are you both prepared for this to get ugly? Because it will." Amelia and Jackson looked at each other, and something unspoken passed between them. A shared determination, a united front. "We are ready," they said together. Forged documents, the hearing was set for 2 weeks later at the county courthouse. In the meantime, Jackson hired forensic handwriting analysts to authenticate his letter, while Amelia organized every piece of documentation she had meticulously saved over the years. But Titanium Corporation was not idle. One morning, a courier delivered a thick envelope. Inside was a contract dated 12 years ago, supposedly signed by Jackson's father, agreeing to sell the property to a development company that Titanium had since acquired. Jackson stared at the signature in disbelief. "This is impossible. My father never would have signed this. Are you certain? Rebecca asked, her voice careful. Absolutely. He loved this land. He wanted it to stay in the family forever. Then this is a forgery, Rebecca said grimly. And a good one. We will need to prove it, which means experts, depositions, and time we do not have. Amelia felt panic rising. What if we cannot prove it is fake? Then we lose, Rebecca said simply. Titanium would have a prior claim to the property that supersedes everything else. That night, Jackson could not sleep. He paced the living room of the farmhouse while Amelia sat on the couch, her face drawn with worry. Maybe we should take their money, she said quietly. $5 million. We could buy another place. Start over. Jackson shook his head fiercely. This is not just a house, Amelia. This is where our children took their first steps. Where you planted that garden. Where we built that tree house. This is home. Home does not mean anything if we lose it in court, she said, her voice breaking. Jackson sat beside her, taking her hands in his. Then we make sure we do not lose. We fight with everything we have, and if we go down together. Amelia looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the man she had fallen in love with so many years ago. Not the ambitious boy who ran away, but a man who had finally learned what truly mattered. Together, she echoed softly. The courtroom showdown, the courthouse buzzed with tension as journalists and onlookers filled every seat. The story had captured public attention. David versus Goliath battle between a small family and a corporate giant. Jackson wore his best suit, but his hands bore fresh calluses from building the treehouse. Amelia sat beside him in a simple dress, her back straight with determination. Across the aisle, Preston Cole sat with 3 corporate attorneys, all sharp suits and confident smiles. The judge entered. An older woman with kind eyes and a reputation for fairness. This court is now in session. Titanium Corporation versus Wright and Parker regarding property ownership dispute. For hours, lawyers presented arguments. Titanium's team displayed the forged contract, claiming prior ownership rights. They painted Jackson as an absentee owner, who had abandoned the property for a decade. But when Rebecca stood to present their defense, the energy in the room shifted, Your Honor. We present evidence that the defendant, Jackson Wright, always intended this property for personal and family use. She displayed his letter, authenticated by 3 independent experts. Furthermore, Amelia Parker has maintained continuous residence and care of the property for 10 years, paying all taxes and making substantial improvements. She placed photograph after photograph on the evidence table. The rebuilt porch, the thriving garden, the repaired barn. Documentation of every nail, every board, every penny Amelia had invested. This is not abandoned property, Rebecca continued, her voice ringing with conviction. This is a home. And while Titanium Corporation has money and lawyers, they do not have what my clients have. 10 years of love, sweat, and dedication poured into this land. Preston stood to rebut, but Rebecca was not finished. As for the contract Titanium relies upon, our forensic analysis proves conclusively that it is a forgery. She presented the expert reports showing discrepancies in ink age, paper composition, and signature characteristics.